So here we are. This is the role of the administrator in supporting inclusive and equitable practices. And my name's Linda Brault. I direct projects for WestEd, and I do a lot of the work I do in partnership with the um, California Department of Social Services, Child and Care and Development Division. So just wanting you all to know that that's who supports a lot of the work that we do. So I direct several statewide projects. One of them is called Beginning Together. Probably some of you are familiar with it, but we'll talk a little bit more about it later on. So my background is in early intervention, early childhood special education, and early childhood. And I've been doing work on inclusion for most of my life, and certainly very, very strongly the last 25 years or so. So I'm going to give you an overview of the agenda, what we're planning on doing today. So we're going to start with equity because that is in the title, and I think it's a really helpful way to ground ourselves. Um, we're going to talk about how we are holding the vision in California and how you as administrators can answer the question why inclusion, which might sometimes come up. We're going to talk about the key elements to having that inclusion be successful. And those are access, participation, and support. And then we're going to talk about some of the resources available to you all to support this journey. And those include Beginning Together, the Map to Inclusion and Belonging website, and Inclusion Works. So let me just say, I did not have a webinar welcome slide. However, we will be doing breakout rooms later. So my hope is that you will be able to participate at least verbally and visually if you can. It's always nice if people can see the faces. You don't need to have your camera on while I'm presenting because I'm not even watching. The second thing is I'm using my screen has fills up the whole computer, and I am not monitoring the chat, but Holly Lewis is. So if you have a private question, you can send it directly to Holly Lewis. If you just have a generic question or comment, you may put that in the chat, and other people can you can chat amongst yourselves if you need to. I will say that if you have questions, Holly will let me know if it's something I need to pause and answer, but we hopefully will have some time for questions and answers at the end as well. So by all means, add your questions and your comments as we go. And if it's not critical, we may hold them until the end. And then finally, this is being recorded, so it'll probably be made available later on if you get called away because a substitute didn't show up or one of those things that happens to directors. So here I go. Oh, I went backwards. So this is the National Association for the Education of Young Children recently put out a really nice section on advancing equity in early childhood education. And it's on their website. There's a lot of really good resources. And one of the statements they have is that all children have the right to equitable learning opportunities that enable them to achieve their full potential as engaged learners and valued members of society. And I think that those two phrases at the end are so important to what makes inclusion work, which is to really engage children at whatever level of participation they have and to value them as members of society, to not think that they have to earn their way into inclusion. So, in order to do this, I don't like this. Oh no, let me go back. I have a little funky thing in the middle of my slide. You can't see it. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about starting from equity. This is a report that was written by the Children's Equity Project. And in the Padlet, which I'm sure Holly will post in the chat right now, there is a link to the page with the full report. And it's I think it's they have a summary report and a longer report, and neither of them are that long of a read, but they're very, very informative. And if your interest is piqued by whatever we talk about today, I'm going to encourage you to look into those that report. So the Children's Equity Project is out of the Arizona State University, so right next door. And they wrote this report about starting with equity from the early years to the early grades. And so their initiative really looks at equitable systems, equitable child serving systems. And they have three main um, kind of emphasis areas for equity. One is equity to access, so children have to get in. Then the experiences are positive and fair, and their outcomes are not associated with demographic characteristics. And so they have a lot of research going on, they have policy recommendations, and they have practice recommendations. So they did this in this report. There are three key policy areas that strongly influence children's experiences in the classroom. And I just love the fact that they really honed it down to these three things. And the three things are harsh discipline, and its disproportionate application in learning settings, lack of inclusion of young children with disabilities in learning settings, and inequitable access to high quality learning opportunities for dual language and English learners. So, those are the three policy areas that they say if we start paying attention to these, equity is going to be improved. So, the first one is something I'm sure you're all aware of, and there's been a lot of wonderful work done by Walter Gilliam and his colleagues on suspension and expulsion. And they really capitalize it as harsh discipline and disproportionate application. So what happens is, and I'm sure you've seen some of the studies, is that children are expelled and suspended from childcare settings at a rate much higher than in school age. And the reason that that's shocking is people just say, well, what could a little kid do? And the truth of the matter is, they don't have to do much. It's just because there isn't a set of protections in for most programs. So all a director has to say is he's not a good fit for our program. Now, if you receive state funding, then you're asked to do some more careful look. And we would certainly encourage you to think that when you move children from place to place to place because they're asked to find a better fit, quote unquote, that really counts as expulsion. And when a child is moved from place to place to place, these are the very children who sometimes are struggling with relationships and skill development. And by starting over and over and over, they don't have an opportunity to develop those things. The other thing is there's a real disproportionality. Boys are much more likely to be expelled or suspended than girls. Black children and other children of color are also more likely to be suspended and expelled, and children with disabilities. So that's something to be very cautious about. So one of the things I always say to people is start paying attention to when there's problems happening and teachers are asking for help in the classroom. Track somehow, are these all boys? Are they boys of color? Are they children with disabilities? Start tracking to see if you're falling into this kind of pattern. There is no evidence that suspension and expulsion changes behavior or does anything at all to support and help the child. And there's abundant evidence that it's really got negative short-term and long-term effects. So it is damaging to children. It's very hard on families. And we know that behavior challenges are hard on teachers too. So I was talking with somebody who was just, we not only have had the COVID lockdown experience in many parts of California, there have been natural disasters, be it fires or floods, that have also disrupted the lives of children and families. So when children and families have not had the optimal growing opportunities, you might see less mature social and emotional development. And that's going to show up in some behaviors that when people say, oh, that's more like a 2-year-old than a 4-year-old, okay, I know what to do. That's helpful rather than saying he just is having tantrums. So anyway, that's the first example. The second example is segregated learning for young children with disabilities. So basically what we know, and I'm going to share some with you, is that there's a super strong research and policy base that inclusion is better for all children, including children with disabilities. There is not, those are not studies that are new because even though they have done some more recent ones, but over and over again, the studies show the same result. However, progress has been really slow. It's been hard to move the needle. Um, Inclusion varies quite a bit by the disability category. We still see children with significant physical and motor delays more excluded. Sometimes it's children by age and race and location. And interestingly, most infants and toddlers are provided services in what's called their natural environment, but the natural environment that they're provided services in is most often the home. So even if a child is receiving services in early intervention, sometimes they may be also attending childcare, but their services may be provided in their home setting with their family. And so you may not be getting the support that is needed in your settings, and that's something to just remember. Sometimes families don't think to tell you that their child is receiving early intervention services, or they're worried if they tell you, you're going to say you can't serve them. But even just asking all families on an on your intake form, is your child receiving any early intervention or special education services, we would like to coordinate with them, and just making it a very transparent part of your overall process. Here's the hard thing. Nationally, less than 50% of preschoolers are receiving their services in regular early childhood programs. So they may be co-enrolled, they may be attending a special education program in the morning and childcare in the afternoon, but the services are not being provided in those settings. And in California, the percentage is even lower. And so we know that, again, type of disability does influence this. We know that when children have more significant delays, whether that's because of autism or developmental other developmental issues, that's going to also impact them. And as we've expanded public pre-K and those, kinds of things that have happened over the years, it has not increased the inclusion, which everybody thought it would, because one of the barriers that was claimed is, well, we just don't have public preschool options for children with disabilities like we do in elementary school, but that's not true anymore. So there are a lot of barriers. One of the biggest ones is ableism, just thinking that, again, kids aren't ready. They're not ready to be included, that we have to wait. And that is, there were some kids who will never be ready by those measures. That inclusion is not about being ready, it's about making access happen. There's also a lot of times that people think there's a policy barrier or a financial barrier. Don't get me started on some of the things that people think are true that are not. But that is, when you have something and you say, well, I don't think I can do that, check it out. Make sure you double check it. And if you've got a new licensing analyst, they may not know either, so you might have to do some digging. um, People are concerned about lack of workforce preparation, and that's something that we want to address with pre-service training for sure, but we also want to do that through a lot of ongoing training. Oversight and accountability comes up, and uncoordinated systems. Sometimes you all are on the same campus as a special education program, but there's not talking with one another. There's not interaction. So that's what we know about the inclusion issue. And the last one is inequitable access. And I love that they misspelled high quality learning. It's not my slide, so I couldn't fix it. But this is for dual language and English learners. And I think that it's important to just remember that language has been used as a tool for exclusion, that historically children who did not speak English were not allowed into schools. They made separate Mexican schools in some parts of the Southwest. Um, a lot of times there's still segregation for children who are learning English. And what's interesting is the predictor of academic outcomes is the degree of segregation. So the more integrated children are, the more together they are, the more equitable and similar their academic outcomes are. And this is true for children with disabilities as well, but a lot of teachers have lower expectations for children who do not speak English as their first language, or for children with disabilities. And those lower expectations really influence the ways that we interact with children, the things that we set up for them. So we really want to have high expectations for all children. And that's why they say, unless they're in a bilingual school. So there are more and more schools that advertise themselves as being bilingual that really value that. Now, interestingly, we have lots of societies where bilingualism is valued, where it's just the norm, it's expected. I don't know how many of you have been shocked to find that you go to a foreign language and lots of people speak English because they learned English along with their other languages. Um, and when that's the norm, when people value bilingualism, there's first of all great research to show that bilingual brains are very flexible and have some additional learning capacities, but there's also negligible differences in outcomes if you're a native speaker or a non native English speaker, but you've been in a society and in a school system that sees your bilingualism as an asset and not a deficit. So those are the three big policy areas. Again, harsh discipline, segregation or lack of inclusion for children with disabilities, and also inequitable access for children who are English learners. So we're going to get a chance right now for you to go into a breakout room, a small group breakout room, and Holly has set that up, I believe, and you will be with maybe 4 or 5 people. And so that's why I'm hoping that some of you are able to participate, because otherwise it's going to be a boring group. And what we'd like you to do is introduce yourself, say where you're located and what program you direct. And then talk amongst your group. When you introduce yourself, say which of these policies, of these 3 policies, feel like they are the most applicable in your setting. And then how does this information inform your next steps to plan and act for children in the systems and communities you serve? So I want you to have it, introduce yourself, where you're located, the program you direct, and then talk about applicability to your setting, and then have a general brief conversation about next steps or ideas that you may have. You're going to have 15 minutes, Holly. So if you can set that for 15 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I'm hoping that most of you got a chance to talk. I'm sure there were a few people who um, were unable to connect for whatever reason. But I just wanted to see if I'm going to just list the people that are in a room and see if there's anybody from the room that just wants to say, if, anything from the conversation that came up, whether it was something that you felt was really impactful to your setting or forward. So room 1 had Claudia Espinosa, Kelly, Rulanda, and Veronica. Did anything come up? Any of that group want to say anything? See what happens when I didn't tell you to have a recorder and a reporter. I
Well,
know.
we all agree that all 4 of our programs, we don't do expulsion or suspension, and that we really help guide and get services for the families. There was some differences where Veronica's program is just all state, where SETA is both. We have both. We have state and Head Start, so our kids are still getting some of the extra services that Head Start provides, versus if just a state funded does not have. So.
Right, right. So there are certainly, and then sometimes you may be Head Start that's in a more isolated area and not have access to some of the extra services, or you may be a public program that has access to things because you're affiliated with a district or something else. So it is always interesting to see what other resources are available. Well, thank you for sharing, Kelly. And when we have our next breakout group, I'm going to tell you in advance that room 2 was Christina, Katerina, Shauna, and I don't know what your first name was, but Verbergueno. So is anybody in that group have something they could just share?
So we talked about let's see here, inequitable access where families are not getting the resources that they need to support their children with either a special need, whatever they need. It could even be that they're lacking food, anything that there's just not enough support, enough outside resources or inside resources within the educational system.
Yeah, that really is something. And I think I know that there's some communities that have really made an effort to document that more and to have that available in their I think it's the 211 system, isn't it? The 211 is supposed to be your, but I know it's very in its infancy stage in a lot of places. So any time that those of you who work with agencies such as Head Start that are required to put together, kind of the support group lists or the support resources and support, anytime you can share that through the resource and referral agency or other things, it's very helpful for people to have access and to know what the resources in their community are. Thanks. Room 3 was Jamie, Christina, Maria, and Mary. A different Christina.
We talked about the staff training. I mean, that was my issue is getting the support for the staff, especially those who have had more children with IEPs or in the assessment process, to do it. And then Christina was a fabulous resource on some suggestions for my class that is just overwhelmed.
Good. Well,
and people mentioned the CBIC
yes,
training network of information.
Yeah, very nice. So I just want to also mention that one of the things we're trying to do too is make sure you get some connection to some of those resources. I will say that training alone is not enough either. And one of the things that you'll find is sometimes teachers have been to trainings, but nobody's helped them think about how does it look in my classroom. So coaching, if you can get some of that coaching or on-site consultation, it can really make a difference. All right. Room 4, Danielle, Laprice, Megan, and Zoila.
Hi. So we had a chance, I talked about, so we have a program where children with IEP, some of them go to a preschool program with the school district. So just trying to collaborate more with the teachers to make sure that we're meeting the goals and the needs of the children. So we're trying to find a way to do that this year, because we noticed in the past that there's very kind of little communication with them. So,
and I've got a document I'm going to share later that's just right up that alley. So good. That's perfect. Yeah. Okay, there's 2 more rooms left. So if you haven't talked yet, your room's coming. Get thinking. Room 5 was Danette, Hope, Sandra, and Sharon.
We just introduced ourselves. We spoke a little bit, but then Danette works in the city that I grew up in and my family still lives in, and it turns out we know somebody. So we might have gone off on a tangent a little bit.
It's all about relationships. That's
right. Right. Danette, I just
we're building relationships. We're networking.
Absolutely.
We're networking, which really, how fantastic is that in the world of Zoom?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just fine. So the last room was Ashley, Kimberly, Rachel, and Sylvia.
Hello. We shared about pretty much like what everyone was saying. It's just having that staff training and, like you said, that coaching and that on-site training and following through and being consistent. So that's what we mostly spoke about.
Well, great. Thank you guys for indulging me. I know that going to Zoom meetings, you can just kind of zone out, and I really tried to build in a little time for you to talk to each other. You will be back with the same groups for another breakout session in a few more slides. And at that point, we will want somebody to report back like we've done this time, but I'm going to go in reverse order. I'll start with the room 6 and go up. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're together next time. But in the meantime, I really, really appreciate you sharing what you have shared. And I hope that some of you do, in fact, look into that article, that report from the Children's Equity Project, because I think you will find it insightful. It's got lots of really practical information. So I'm going to go back into presentation mode with the PowerPoint. So here's the vision that I'm hoping I can encourage you all to take and move forward with. And that's that all children in California, including children who have disabilities, health conditions, or other delays, have access to quality childcare with active participation and appropriate support. So there are 3 key words in there, and I'll explain later why those words are important. So one of the things to know is special education services are part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and they fall under what's called Part B. And the primary goal of special education for Part B 3 to 5 is to ensure that all children have access to the general curriculum. So you want to make sure that all children have access to the general curriculum. And access doesn't mean that all children have to participate in the curriculum in the same way. It's that what are the key components, what's really crucial for children to be learning in these ages, and how can we make sure that this is something that they're exposed to. So if you wanted to know what the curriculum should be for your preschool groups, you should have access to the California Preschool Curriculum Frameworks. And these frameworks, there's 3 volumes of them, and these give you the kind of big ideas of the main areas that you should be developing for your curriculum. And any of the commercial curriculums will meet these needs. And you can also get ideas from the preschool curriculum framework. And I will say that we worked really hard. I was able to be involved in the development of the curriculum frameworks and did the universal design review. And we tried to be sure that we were inclusive of children with varying abilities and who spoke different languages and who had, different kinds of behavior. So you'll see examples that should ring true for a lot of you. So why is it so important to think about inclusive environments for young children? And Dr. Phil Strain, who's been working at this for a lot of years and has done a lot of his work with children with autism, but has worked just across the field of special education. He wants us to just know, and this is what the research has shown, high quality, inclusive settings are the only environments with data that consistently support children's superior learning, and non-inclusive environments, so those separated special education classrooms, have been shown to negatively impact children's learning. So he's pulled together the research, and inclusive options beat the alternative a ratio of about 15 to 1. So children in inclusive options do 15 times better than children who are in a special education alone. And this is not what people think. They just can't believe it. But one thing to just remember and to hang on to is that all children are general education children. Special education is not a label for a child. It's not a place that children are sent. Special education is the supports and services provided to any child who needs those extra supports. So all children are first and foremost to be served in the general education program. And so when you have children enrolled together and in the same classroom, that maximizes opportunities for generalization to happen, which is the ability for a kind of content knowledge or skill set to be understood in a variety of contexts, so that children don't learn how to do something only in this room, but they don't know how to do it when they're in a different room. The other thing that happens is if you're, and I appreciated the fact that some of you were sharing you're trying to do this, if everybody knows what the goals are for the child, the IEP goals, then those can get addressed all day, every day. I've worked for a lot of years supporting children in inclusive settings, and I wanted to be really clear that when I came and was giving my suggestions and guidance and looking at what the child was doing, it wasn't that my time was that special education time, because my time was just a kind of the start. It's like if you took lessons for tennis and you never practiced in between. So you went to the tennis lesson and the tennis coach gave you all these different ways to do things, and then you didn't do anything else until you came back the next week. that's what people sometimes think is they think, oh, good, the inclusion person's coming, the special educator's coming, they're gonna teach the child. But the truth is, we really need everything else. We need it all to be happening. And when you're in a general education classroom, there's a lot of daily routines and activities that lend themselves to those goals and activities. So it's easier to address them and to get them kind of woven into the child's daily life. So here's one of the studies that he actually did, and the names on the bottom might not mean much to you, but these are all developmental um, assessments tools that are used for children with disabilities. And these were what it looked like for children who were in non-inclusive settings in their early years, in their preschool years, or who were in inclusive settings in their preschool years. And what you can see is the children who were in inclusive settings scored on these measures of development significantly higher than the children who were in the non-inclusive or segregated settings. So that's, it's just the bottom line. We also know that if a child starts in a non-inclusive setting, it is harder and harder for them to be included later, because so much of what happens in the inclusive settings is just learning the kind of non-verbal, non-communicated ways of being in the world. So if you don't have a chance to sort of learn some of that negotiation and social skills, you're going to have more and more difficulty as you get older. So Maslow's hierarchy comes up, and I'm hoping this is something that a lot of you are familiar with. But essentially, we know that in order for children to grow, and for any of us to grow, we have these hierarchical needs. So there are things that are important to us, like food, water, shelter, and warmth. It's, I don't know if you've ever been in a really cold training room trying to listen, but I've had people who just say, I can't even listen to you. I'm so cold right now. And I've also been so hot that I have a hard time training. So, finding that balance. But food and water and shelter are super critical. And if you have children who are food insecure or who have, are unhoused, you may have some children who their physiological needs are not being met. So that interferes with everything else, because that has to be in place. The next thing up from that is safety. So children have to be secure. They have to feel free from fear. And again, if you have a lot of things happening in your outside of school life that are shaking that safety net, that's important for you to understand, and that can come up. And we might want to be really thoughtful about providing kind of a little island of security. So having some real predictability for children in the classroom setting, and making sure that we're paying attention to their sort of safety and other kinds of needs. After those two things are taken care of, then children start looking for relationships. That's where they reach out and they look for what's called a sense of belonging. Like, this is my group. This is who I fit with, who I hang with. And that's where you develop friends. That's where your family lives. And those three elements need to be solidly and firmly in place. And then your brain has access to the part of the brain that learns. So only when those bottom three parts of the hierarchy are firmly in place are you at your best and able to learn. So if you've ever been in a situation where, something like you have an emergency happening at home and you're in a workshop, you're going to have a hard time focusing and paying attention to the workshop, because you're very much distracted and worrying about the people you care about, or the situation at home. So interestingly, that's something that we forget about with children, that for their brain to have access to learning, they have to be in a pretty calm, regulated space. And after all of that, then we get to the self-actualization, where we can truly be our best selves. So Norman Kuntz, who's an advocate for inclusion and a disability rights advocate, wrote an article back in 1992, and I do have the connection, the link here, but he wrote an article called "The Need to Belong: Rediscovering Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs." And what Norman points out is that in many, many systems, particularly special education, but I would also say early childhood education with some of the expulsion and suspension problems, we have a tendency to invert the middle two tiers of Maslow's hierarchy. So we will agree to provide physiological safety foundations, but then we tell children they have to earn their way into belonging. So you cannot be a part of this class until you learn to talk, or you cannot be a part of this class until you keep your hands to yourself, or you cannot be a part of this class unless you can um, stay in the large group. So whenever we've done that, when we've flipped the script, so to speak, what happens is children know that they don't belong. I was observing a program where they had a special education class next door to a general education program, and they would bring the children from the special education class over to join the children in the general education class. But that system of joining was very tied to time, and the times didn't always line up with the activities. So I was there one day and they were bringing two children from the special education class into the general education class. And when they entered, the children in the general education class were already distributed into small group activities. And so the two kids walked in, didn't know where to go, what to do. They tried, and it was just this real awkward, and one of them just fell to the floor and started crying. And then they got, removed. And basically, they didn't have access in their brains to, like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Because they are a visitor and they didn't have that sense of this is where I belong. I've seen it also with children who are enrolled in a program and are there, but they know that if they have a meltdown or they hit somebody, that they're going to be removed from the classroom. So their sense of I have to earn my way in, or I like it better in the office, so I'm just going to hit somebody so I can get to the office, or my mom can get called and I go home. So I really want us to pay attention to that and to think about how do we support belonging. So when you're looking at inclusion, to me, it's not, although I would like children to be enrolled full-time into the general education program, if you do have a situation where you're sharing children or kids are coming back and forth, think about how do you promote belonging? How do you make sure that the child is not seen as a visitor, but is really assigned to a group ahead of time, knows where they're going to be when they come in the classroom, everybody welcomes them, etc. So just some little things like that. Here's a nice little quote. Diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. So belonging is that deeper sense. And I think that oftentimes you will start to see that for some children, that's where the disconnect is that they do not feel a sense of connection to either the adults in the classroom or to the other children. And if there's not a connection, then they may not feel like they have that belonging. So one of the tools that's available for you as a resource is Inclusion Works. So this is a book that was published by the Department of Education like 12 years ago, and then we just did a second edition, and I'm the primary author on it. And when we did this second edition, we got an opportunity to do a series of videos that illustrated a lot of the concepts. Those are now currently available for anyone who wants to just sign up for the CDE streaming. So I'm going to show you a little tiny snippet of 2 of the videos just so you can see what's available. But I want to tell you that this is the definition that we use for from Inclusion Works. We want the full and active participation of children with disabilities or delays in community activities, services, and programs designed for children who are typically developing, including childcare. If support, accommodations, or modifications are needed to ensure full active participation, they are provided appropriately. And this participation results in an authentic sense of belonging for the child and family. So that's our definition, and that's what we're hoping to do. And as I say, Inclusion Works is a free download available to you as a book. We do have some print copies that we're sometimes are looking at to make. It was recently translated into Spanish, so it also will be very soon available in Spanish. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show a video, and I'm going to tell you that I know for some of you with bandwidth issues, videos don't always come through the best, but you also do have access to these videos if you want to watch them on your own. So right now I'm going to do a new share of that, and we're going to watch just a couple of minutes of this recording.
The publication of the second edition of Inclusion Work intended to introduce many of the key messages and recommendations found in Inclusion Works, as well as provide examples of practice from inclusive settings in both early learning and care centers and family child care homes.
Everything we do, we want to say, how does this adaptation move us toward belonging?
Linda Brault, the primary writer of Inclusion Works and project director for supporting inclusive early learning, working together for inclusion and belonging, is featured throughout these videos, along with teachers.
Okay, friends, look. What does that mean? Clean up. Clean up. Let's put our books away, please.
Providers.
Next time, won't you sing with me?
Specialists.
Your turn. Oh, you still want to play? Yes.
Parents.
They're very open with us, and they've never made us feel like we're on the back burner.
And children.
Okay. Yellow. Okay, wait a second.
Because children with disabilities are often indistinguishable from other children, in moments where the video image contains multiple children, the child with disabilities will be identified by a brief focus highlight. The fundamental message of Inclusion Works and these videos is this. Many early educators are already including children with disabilities, and you can do this with confidence and competence. Focusing on what you know about children and seeking support from family members and specialists will enable you to individualize for any child, as well as promote authentic belonging.
There are three. Oh, that's my next one, so hang on. Go back to the video. I mean, to the, there you go. So hopefully you could see enough of that to get a sense that we have a lot of real life experiences that I think can be very helpful for teachers to observe. And so let me tell you, you'll hear some terms over and over again, and I'm going to explain why. So the Division for Early Childhood, which is a organization out of the Council for Exceptional Children, that's the professional home for people who do early childhood special education and early intervention, partnered with the National Association for the Education of Young Children to come up with a position statement on early childhood inclusion. And this joint position statement has this kind of position. Early childhood inclusion embodies the values, policies, and practices that support the right of every infant and young child and his or her family, regardless of ability, to participate in a broad range of activities and contexts as full members of families, communities, and society. The desired results of inclusive experience, I love that they use desired results, sorry, of inclusive experiences for children with and without disabilities and their families include a sense of belonging and membership, positive social relationships and friendships, and development and learning to reach their full potential. The defining features of inclusion that can be used to identify high-quality early childhood programs and services are access, participation, and supports. So that's the three phrases you're going to hear a lot. So here's why. These are the three things we want you to think about with your own programs. Access is more than just getting in, because legally you can't say no just on the basis of a child's disability. You can't say, oh, we don't do disabilities here. Now, people do that, I know, all the time, but you're not allowed to. And certainly in the public programs, you're expected to be open to all. But when you have children that get in, you want to be ready for them. Again, they don't have to be ready for you. You want to be ready for them. So that's when you can look at universal design and universal design for learning, which is something that has gotten increased play lately and more exposure. And we can share some resources for that with you. The next thing, as we want to say, is it's not good enough to be there if you're just sitting in the corner. You want participation. We want children who can actively engage and participate and interact with the adults and the other children in the room and the materials in the room. So whatever you need to do to accommodate that, to help them be participants. And finally, we want the supports for these accommodations integrated within the general education services. It's not ideal to have somebody come in and pull a child out into a separate room, wave their magic wand, which of course we don't have, but do their therapeutic interventions and then plop the child back in. It's back to the tennis lessons. How are they going to practice in between if you haven't shared what you're working on with the child with anyone else? So being able to integrate that, to do part of a small group so other children are participating, and help that child with the supports in the general education services. So I'm going to show the next little video clip. You will hear about access, participation, and supports. And one of the main speakers here is a man with cerebral palsy who was raised in inclusive experiences all his life and is a lawyer, but he's now oversees disability access for the University of California, Irvine. So I'm going to let you watch that part, and I will start it again since it jumped ahead. There we go. There are 3 key principles needed to ensure high-quality inclusive practices: access, participation, and support.
As an adult, looking back at my inclusive experiences, access, participation, and support in those experiences looked different as I got older. In kindergarten, inclusion was about how I could raise my hand in class. In high school, inclusion was about how I could take a Spanish test orally without giving the answers to the rest of the class. In all of these instances, the teachers said, how can I support Andrew? Never do I need to support Andrew.
Programs are more accessible to all children when they incorporate universal design and universal design for learning. Through this process, program staff think proactively and ensure that the physical environment is ready for all children, and that there are multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression available. So again, that just gives you a little bit of a taste, and we do go into more detail in all of those things in the videos and in the books. So I just want to remind you, it is something that's available to all of you as a resource. So we developed a tool to help people look at those 3 elements of belonging. So it looks at access, participation, and support. And basically it's a little checklist that you can just say, yes, we do this, or here's some, no, we don't do it fully, and here's some next steps. So I have provided this tool to you. I think I provided it in both English and Spanish. And that's something that can guide conversations, particularly as you work to promote true belonging through inclusion. So this is what we're going to do in the small group breakout. We're going to look over the I Belong checklist and see if there's anything on there that you in your agency could readily answer with a yes. And is there any areas that you would like to work on in your program? So what I'd like to do is give you about 3 minutes to locate the handout and skim it. And can you pull it up, Holly, on the screen? So if somebody for some reason they don't have access to it.
Yeah, I can share. I can broadcast it to the breakout rooms, and I'll put the link in the chat as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I want it broadcast to the breakout rooms because I like them to be able to see each other when they talk.
Okay.
But if you could just do it now so people can, I just want you to have a minute to think about your own answers so that when you get into the breakout rooms, which by the way should be with the same people you were with before, you can launch right into here. Oh, I could definitely say yes to this, or, I could say yes to everything, but then I'm wondering, would my staff agree? Because sometimes that's it too. You as the director say, well, yes, but would your staff have the same answer? So in the, it's down there. I belong checklist English. Yep, there you go. I will also say Holly's on it. She put the small group questions in the chat box too. So when you get into your breakout groups, you can open the chat box and the questions will be there. And it's to look over the I belong checklist. What's one thing you can readily answer yes? What's an area you'd like to work on? And we would like a brief summary to the questions from your small group breakout to say, well, 3 of us said we could do this, or none of us had a yes, or all of us had, we just want a brief summary, and especially if there was something that you thought you wanted to be working on. Okay, here comes everybody. So welcome back. I am going to confess that I have a cat in my lap. We acquired these cats about a week and a half ago, and then my daughter, whose cats they are, left town with my husband for a week. So my task was to bond with the cats. So as you can see, mission accomplished. He just likes to hang out, but likes to be held like a baby on his back. It's very strange. His name is Frodo. We have Frodo and Sam. And we had Pippin and Merry were our last cats. So we've now completed the hobbits from Lord of the Rings. So boy and a girl, though. Sam is the girl. All right. More than you needed to know about cats. So I'm going to ask, as I said before, I'm just going to ask for a brief little summary check back. So room 6, that was Ashley, Kimberly, Maria, and Rachel. If you guys wouldn't mind starting us off. And hopefully
Okay.
I'd asked you to pick a recorder and a reporter. So,
Okay. Okay, so for the access, most of us said yes, but we also agreed that there's still a lot of these sections that are work in progress. We have new staff coming in, staff set in their ways. So just a work in progress. And then for participation, there was also, I believe in all these 3, is just room for improvement, being able to be a bit more flexible and just having that continuously happening throughout the school years, and with the families and children in our programs. And then for supports, in our group, most they're not working directly with the district, but they do work as closely as they can with the families and what their needs are, and requesting referrals and going about it that way with the specialists, to provide, but also encourage as much support as they can in the program.
great.
And yeah,
See,
that was about it.
that's perfect. That's perfect. And the reality is that the districts have been short-staffed like everybody else. So it's hard sometimes for them to have the people to provide consultation and support, but we're going to give you a tool that you can use and when you can make requests of it, because theoretically they should be able to help you with that. Room 5, it's Danette, Hope, Sandra, and Sharon.
Hi. So we I'm in a room with somebody else who's also on the same thing, so it was echoing.
Oh, I should have put you in the same group. Sorry.
We talk all the time. It's kind of nice to be in different groups.
There you go. There you go.
we, when we were looking at each of the different kind of highlighted squares, we both was, Hope is kind of, she's working with Children's Home Society. So hers is just a little bit different.
Mhm.
Although we said that, you know, we're on the journey for all of them, have a journey to continue, but we have begun that. My agency, which is Long Beach Unified Head Start and CDC, we've been working a lot with equity, not just for kids with IEPs, but all kids. So we really are on the journey for all of those. The one area we said that we both agreed we have a lot of work to still do is that participation, creating an atmosphere of belonging for all children and families. Not that they are welcome into the school, that they should feel like it's their school.
Right.
And that really that idea of walking next to us, not behind us, not in front of us, but next to us. And that idea of it truly takes a village and we're all important pieces of that village. And how do you do that specifically when a kid might not be developing typically? Or what we're seeing a lot of after the pandemic is behaviors kind of bouncing off the wall.
Right.
And how do you do that so that when you're talking to families, you're talking about how incredible their children are who might need support in these different areas so that those families are walking next to us and are understanding, no, this has got nothing to do with you or your child. They just need extra support so that they're interested and willing to sign an assessment, as opposed to thinking that, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that those are all right on, and it's a journey for everybody, and so I'm guessing that we'll have some themes that'll come back, and in the interest of time, I'm going to just remind people to just say, oh, we had similar things, and you can add something. So thank you so much, Sharon. The next group is Danielle, Laprice, Megan, and Zoila.
So for us, we felt we were doing okay with the participation and the supports, but where we felt we really all needed work was on the access, and specifically having the equipment available for the children who need differing equipment, and also with incorporating universal design for learning, because most of us were not sure if our teachers even knew about the terms or concepts of that, and we all need to be a bit more familiar with that also.
Great.
Those were the two areas that we felt we needed some support with.
Good. And that's Inclusion Works talks about that briefly, and then there are a whole trainings for it. I will say that the first bit when you talked about access, what was it I was going to say? Okay, it's gone. You know how that, well, and I have this cat that's so distracting in my lap. I had something, but maybe it'll come back to me. Okay, the next room was Wong, Jamie, Christina, Maria, and Mary.
So I'll be the speaker. We looked through the checklist and we all pretty much agreed that we touch upon each area, but it could all be stronger just in general. And really just working with the teachers as well. But some things that got noted was, with some of the newer generations of teachers, a lot are relying more on technology, such as reading books through YouTube. YouTube's reading the book. YouTube's leading the dance. And they're putting it up maybe on a little tablet that they're expecting several children to look at one time. And so that interaction piece between the teacher and the children is somewhat lacking. And then on the other side of it is some teachers have such a high expectation as well that they're not realizing some of these children are just 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're not doing the work of a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. And sometimes that leads to behaviors, or even just like a lack of challenge, or or the routine never gets changed up to where they're experiencing something new.
Yeah.
Good so point.
And I think that technology thing is something I've certainly seen post-pandemic, and for teachers that have the technology like a smart board in their classroom, that the over-reliance on it. And I think there's been some research that talks about like the different way that we connect with people on the screen versus people in person. There's something about mirror neurons and interaction that children, while they will watch the screen, it's not the same as the same exact song being done in person. So I hope you can really encourage teachers to not use the screens. They get enough of that outside of school. Okay, the next room, Angela, Christina, Katerina, Shauna, and Vanessa.
So we talked about creating an environment so children have access, right? Just, I mean, having, making sure that furniture meets children's needs, children have accessibility to materials, are able to move around the classroom freely, starting there. And just really when we're planning our lessons, just really thinking about being inclusive to students, not only those that may need something, but considering kids as a whole. One of our partners in our in our group said that they created like this store where they got groceries from outside agency, and they kids were able to buy food not based on if they needed the food, not based on, but just every kid, that activity created an experience for every kid.
Wow.
And that kind of opened my mind to, she was creating an inclusive activity because maybe kids at home don't have time with their families. So that created an extension of the learning for those kids. Maybe another family does need the food. So really just being inclusive overall.
Nice. That's a great idea. Okay, I remember the other thing I was going to say. As you think about equipment for children, it is really important that if a child has specific needs for equipment, that you work with their family and specialists about it, and don't say, "Oh, we've got this great chair left over from this other child," because sometimes it's contraindicated. You might not know that. So, oh, good, you're going to leave. All right, last group, Casta, Claudia, Kelly, I'm not saying your name right, Ruliwanda, and Veronica.
Yes, hi, this is Veronica. I'll be speaking on behalf of the team. We went through the checklist, and then we actually started having a really great conversation on whether we actually do universal design for learning and what does that mean. And so through conversation, we all agree that we do it because we are looking at particular children's needs, and we make those modifications. We buy the materials to meet the child's needs, but then also not just the child that may be coming into the classroom with an established IEP or FSC, but any child that may need a particular tool to be successful in the classroom. So we did spend a lot of time talking about that and wanting to know more about universal design for learning, just to make sure that we're actually doing it the way that it's the framework that we're using, the framework, and that we meet all of that. The other that we also touched base towards the end is, this is great. This is a great tool for us to look and complete ourselves, but just wondering, what would our staff say? And giving this checklist to our staff to see if we're all on the same page, and if we're not, what does that say in general? And looking at that data to see what next steps we need to take in creating a room of community with our staff so that we're all on the same page, understanding what, for example, universal design for learning truly means.
Excellent. And that's what we're hoping. We're hoping this is a tool that can guide some conversations, and you can, just focus on access for one whole, staff meeting, and give people the questions and let them think about it, and then have them small groups or whatever. So we're really hopeful. And again, you can show them clips from Inclusion Works if you wanted, because those are available to you, or you could show them we have the sections, you can download them for free. So speaking of all that, I'm going to finish up our conversation today with sharing some other resources for you, just so that you have those as very powerful leaders that you are. So Inclusion Works has a whole section on working with consultants and specialists, and working together between the consultants, the specialists, and the general educators. And we've pulled it out into a single page handout that can guide, like if a specialist is new to consulting, maybe somebody just got their speech and language degree and they've only worked in clinical experiences, and now they're hired to come out and support your children in your setting, and they think, oh, I need a room to go work with them, and you can say, oh, here's some of the things we'd like to have you do. So it's just something we want to provide for you. It's a download that's linked onto the Google Doc, so you can have that. And this is something, Danielle, when you were talking earlier about, I think it was you that talked about how you want to know how to help look at the way that the specialists are working within your system. The other resource is I run Beginning Together, and we have an institute that trains people to be inclusion facilitators. So Inclusion Facilitator Institute and I don't know why it says and facilitators. So basically what we ask people to do, and we've been doing this now for about the last 3 years, is we ask them to put together a team from either their agency, their district, their community, their county, and that includes people from early childhood, special education, and people who are decision makers. And that team attends this institute together, and the institute happens over the course of a month. So it's going to be on Thursday afternoons in March. That's what we've done the last couple of years. And that institute, people build a vision for inclusion as this team. You learn about systems change and ways that you can use a concept called appreciative inquiry to really help people make the change. You gather some ability to do some training on some topics and become certified to train on setting the stage for inclusion. When concerns arise, how to talk with families sensitively when you're worried about their child's development or behavior. You get an overview of how to introduce inclusion works as a tool. You get an overview of building blocks, which is, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, but building blocks is all about the most common ways to modify and support children's participation when they have disabilities. And then for those of you who work birth to 3, we have this is kind of parallel to the building blocks, which is preschool focused on inclusive strategies for infants and toddlers in group setting. And then you do some action planning. And so we've now had people do this across the state, and they keep working, and we share with one another, and we're really trying to just increase the spread of, we're really trying to change the world. That's our motto, is we want to change the world. The other thing that I want to be really sure you all have awareness of is our website called California Map to Inclusion and Belonging, Making Access Possible. So this website, we've been overseeing it for the last several years, and we've recently moved from the Department of Education to the Department of Social Services, but our address and everything stayed the same. It's operated by West Ed. It's really looking at providing support primarily to child care providers who are trying to implement inclusive practices for children with disabilities birth to throughout their lifespan into their adulthood. And we have a lot of comprehensive resources that have been developed or curated by MAP, and it's useful for families and specialists and other professionals. So you can find MAP by going to the inclusion.org and then clicking on the Map to Inclusion and Belonging link. This is all in the PowerPoint for you. And then this is the homepage of Map to Inclusion and Belonging, and you can see that we have a little carousel, it's called, that features some of the things that will be rolling. And we start with a quote about belonging from Norman Coons. And then there's a whole list of things that we've done on MAP, including some training PowerPoints, different hot topics that we've focused on, and a whole section on inclusion works. So one of the best things about this is we have a county specific resource list. So if you are working in a county and you want to know, who do I call if I have concerns about a child's development, this gives you information about the local special education districts. It talks about the regional center. It talks about the family resource centers that are available for families of children with disabilities. But it also then, for somebody who works in the disability side, has Head Starts listed and has R&Rs and First Fives listed. And I will say that we know that dates and websites and things change, not dates, addresses. So if you want to look at these and get back to us, if you say, oh, I work for this Head Start and our website has changed, that's how we keep this up to date, is people using it. So I just want to mention that that's up there for you. MAP also does this great job, and Cindy Arstein Kerslik is the project coordinator for MAP, and she puts together a mailing newsletter about 4 times a year, and they're just fabulous. They're links to all the newest, latest, and greatest kind of resources. So you can visit the newsletters off of the main page, and you'll see all the latest archived newsletters with more description and links to outside resources. And then finally, Inclusion Works, the second edition, is available free for everybody to download. If you happen to attend the Beginning Together Institute, you will get a hard copy of it, which is very nice. And then the videos are also available at this point for free. It may change at some point, but at this point, that's also happening. And so what I wanted to point out is in Building Blocks, in Inclusion Works, in the Inclusive Group Care, there has been research done that talks about the most common modifications, adaptations, and supports. So when you're looking to boost participation especially, these are things that will really help you. And so in Inclusion Works, we give little vignettes and actually longer stories of how each of these things play out. And then we videotaped several examples. So we talk about environmental support and what does that mean and what does that look like. And then we have several examples of that for you to watch in the Inclusion Works videos. So, and this is what's nice is people a lot of times think if I include a child with a disability, I have to have an aide. I have to have a one-on-one person. I want you to notice that adult support is all the way down at number 6. It's not the most common thing that's used in classrooms, and the adult support doesn't have to be a one-on-one aid. In fact, we recommend not to have somebody that's dedicated only to that child, because what happens is that often limits belonging and participation because the adult becomes like a Velcro to the child, and that's where all the interaction is. So we want to talk about how the adult can be a support, but also back off and allow that child interaction with other children for a while. So these are covered in various degrees of depth in a lot of the resources that we shared with you, because these are really practical things. When a teacher says, well, what can I do? These are just really practical things that are commonly done by lots of teachers. Many teachers probably are doing some of these things, but haven't realized, oh, that's a strategy for increasing participation. Now they can use it more purposefully, perhaps. So an example, when you think of child preferences, so you've got a child that's obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine. And is Thomas the Tank Engine? He's not still around. So it's probably now they're obsessed with Bluey or something. Anyway, you can, spread little Bluey characters out throughout the activities that the child isn't as interested in. So they can read a book to the Bluey character, or they could come over to the puzzle section and the Bluey character can watch them do puzzles, or you can get a Bluey puzzle. So it's a way of really taking advantage of what are the things that child's motivated by, and how can you then weave that into some other places. So, just some simple things like that. And my favorite down here is invisible support. In the Building Blocks, there's an icon for each of these, and invisible support is a ghost is shown for that. But what invisible support is, a lot of what several of you have probably already done, and that's being proactive and being setting things up so that the child is successful. So if you've got a child, say, that has difficulty waiting for a turn, you might proactively call on them second, so that they don't have to wait very long, but you can reinforce them for waiting and say, wow, you were so patient, you waited for your turn. And then the next time you might call on them third. So you can use that invisible support where you're planning how to do that. So lots and lots of different ideas. I am putting my email is on the last page of the PowerPoint, and the website again. And the website also has the teaching pyramid, which is another really great tool for promoting inclusion and belonging, because it really gets concrete strategies for children whose behavior is making it challenging for them to fit in. And as we know, children with behavior challenges have a lot of trouble, and if they have a disability on top of it, sometimes it's super challenging. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions or comments or things in the last 4 minutes that I have you. If you're wondering how to find out about beginning together, we should be posting the flyer and announcement with the application in the next month. I think by the end of the month.
Perfect. That was my question.
Yeah, we would love to have. And what's nice is it's virtual, so you don't have to travel. We do encourage teams, if they can, to get together in the same room during the Zoom sessions, but we have a lot of things that are asynchronous so that people watch them on their own. And then when you come together as a team, we do a lot of team building activities. So we've had some groups where their teams meet together, but you can attend from any part of the state because you don't have to travel.
I sent you my email, so I'm looking forward to
Okay, I'll put you on the list.
for my teachers, and we can set up a room in one of our preschool classrooms and watch the whole program. Thank you so much.
Yay, very good, very good.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome. Goodbye. Have a nice day and enjoy your afternoon sessions, whatever you end up going to.